Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today I have time to do a quick video on winter gardening. Now I'm going to update you on my garden, take you into my grow room and show you what I'm growing for winter harvest, and then plant a few things. Now this is the end of August and it is a little late for me to be planting any seeds out in the garden. But this is just going to be an experiment. It took me a long time to get ready to get these seeds planted, and I'll show you why in just a minute. So it's just going to be an experiment to see if they even sprout, and if they sprout, if they have time to grow over the winter for a spring harvest. So let me show you my grow room first, and then we're going to go and update you on the garden and show you what I'm going to be planting today. Now this is my grow room. It's kind of bare except for my succulents and a few veggies that I've started. This top shelf right here are my winter vegetables. Now I've grown winter vegetables for about 5 years now, and I grow them under low hoop houses. You know, they're just PVC pipes covered with greenhouse plastic. A lot of times I'll do double layer, and sometimes I'll do single layer, and sometimes I'll do single layer with a frost cloth over the vegetables. And they all seem to work out about the same. So this year I think I'm just going to try the single layer with the frost cloth. But usually I grow chard and kale. Some of these I'm growing to keep indoors for a winter harvest indoors. We have cabbages and kohlrabi. I'm going to try collards this year. And then this is chiji which is my spinach alternative. I absolutely love it, and it does really, really well outside. Now down here, we are growing some more veggies for another friend to try winter sowing. He's a college student and he does not have an area to grow his seeds out. So he'll be coming and picking these up here shortly. He's going to grow them in Delta, Utah, which I think the weather's a little harsher, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. So he's growing tatsoi and bok choy and some cauliflower. And then I planted a ton of cabbage because my cabbage germination was really poor the first time. So I planted a ton the second time, and I think I'll give him some cabbage and see how that does for him. Now in about a week I am going to up-pot all of those winter vegetables that are in my grow room into 1-gallon pots. My goal is to plant them out in the garden in September. All my beds are pretty much full right now except for the one that I'm going to be planting up with carrots. I'm going to do some carrots and some parsnips just to see if they'll grow. But my goal with the winter vegetables, the cabbage and those kinds of vegetables, is to get them to a really large size before I put them out in the garden. Now once September hits, the nights get shorter and colder, and the vegetable growth really slows down. So I never really get enough growth to harvest anything over the winter other than the chiji and sometimes the kohlrabi. But the goal is to have a really early spring harvest. And when I usually harvest those vegetables is near the end of February, beginning of March. And that gives me plenty of time to put a spring crop in those beds also. Now I also have fall crops that I've already planted. So let's look at those and see how they're doing. And then I'll show you what I'm going to be planting today. Now this is my lowest bed. This is where I planted some fall crops. We have some fodya, F-O-D-Y-A-H, I think is how you spell it. I'll put it up on the screen. But it's a Chinese broccoli, and that's the ones in the middle. And they give you really tiny sprouts that taste like a cross between broccoli and asparagus, and they're really delicious. So I'm growing those as a fall crop, along with the chiji. And then we have some cauliflower in the back. Now these have been in the ground for about 6 weeks. I put them in ground mid-July, and now it's the end of August. And I have them in this hoop house, which I have absolutely loved. And this year, it's finally working the way I want it to. I've had these hoop houses for about 5 years. And the one thing that I never did was glue the bases together. The bases are made out of PVC pipe. And I just have these connectors here. So they're 3/4 inch connectors with 1/2 inch pipes that are going into them. But I finally glued everything together so it doesn't come apart. The pressure was always pulling these apart. But now they're not pulling apart and they're working beautifully. And I use these all year round. I use these for my fall crops because I can put the shade cloth over the top of them. And that way I can plant them in July and they do beautifully. In the winter, I put greenhouse plastic over them. And then I have actually made them so I can put another greenhouse inside this one so I can have a double layer. Now, as I said, I don't think I'm going to do the double layer this year because I haven't noticed a huge difference in survivability of the crops with a double layer and a single layer. So we're just going to try it and see how it goes. Let's go look at my other fall crops. So on the way up, this is where my spring crops were, and when I tore those out, I had some extra butternut squash and watermelon, so I just threw those in here to see how they would do, and they are doing beautifully. So there's my little watermelon. It's an orange watermelon. We've got a few butternut squash coming, so this has been a very productive bed. I let my fennel go to seed because I left it too long and the bulbs became too tough to harvest. So I figured we could grow it for seed, and the pollinators love it. And it's really beautiful. This is where my garlic was. So I added the cucumbers. Those were put in about 5 weeks ago, and they're growing so fast. I found that if you plant them at the end of July, you can get a good harvest. You know, I only use my cucumbers. I mainly use my cucumbers for pickles, so I don't need year-round cucumbers. So I found if you plant these in July, you can get a good harvest before September, and the frost kills the plants. And I have less bug damage, and they're easier to grow. I've got Swiss chard that I planted early this spring. It's finally looking better. It had real serious leaf miter damage earlier this spring. Now it's just grasshopper damage. This is the bed I'm going to be planting in. Now, the reason it took so long is because I've had these beds for about 15 years, and I had a regular irrigation guy come and set these up for automatic irrigation. And he put 3 lines in each bed, which was never enough. I always had to hand water. And so I've been slowly changing over all my beds to 4 lines, and also adding a shut-off valve on each bed. Let me show you what that looks like. So there's the shutoff valve. It's attached to a line down here. It's actually attached to a swing valve where you can unscrew everything. So when I need to replace the lines, it's not that difficult. But and this line down here is attached to my automatic irrigation system, and my garden beds are all on one zone. So I just put on a shut-off valve, so if there's a bed that I don't want to use, I can shut it off. That saves a little water. And then I added these clamps because I found that especially near the shut-off valve, sometimes we get the hoses popping off. Everywhere else is fine. It's just in those areas where it pops off. So this is all connected to 4 lines, and it's ready to go. So I'm going to be planting some carrots and some parsnips in here without any real hope of anything happening, but we're going to try it anyway. My pepper bed is doing really well, and later this week I'm going to be doing a pepper harvest and a video on that and showing you all my varieties. They're doing beautifully. This is my other bed. Now this is the issue that I am having, that I've had the last 2 years, this year and last year. The grasshoppers are horrendous. I actually did another video that I'll link up above. And I'll also link up above and possibly down below how I created these hoop houses. But about a month ago, I put down some grasshopper bait. The grasshoppers, I think, were too old for that to do a huge amount of good. But it did reduce the population by about half, which is good. But when you're reducing 1 million by half, that's still 500,000, which is what it feels like right now. And they are eating my winter veggies. Now, if I can keep this closed with no grasshoppers inside, then my veggies do just fine. It protects them from the grasshoppers as well as shades the plants. But if I close it and there's a grasshopper hiding in the mulch, then they just go to town and eat everything. So we'll see how well these do. These are going to be for a fall harvest, and these should be ready to harvest near the end of October. Now, as I'm looking at all my beds, I do realize I need to leave a bed for garlic. Now, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to plant the garlic in this bed where my peppers are. So once the peppers are done, I'll harvest all these, pull out the peppers, amend the bed, and put the garlic in here near the end of October. So now I know where my garlic is going. We need to find 1 or 2 beds for winter harvest. So as I said, this is an open bed. It's going to be for winter harvest. And then my cucumbers will be coming out here shortly, and this can also be used for a winter harvest bed. So we'll pull all the cucumbers out by the end of September, add the winter vegetables, throw on another hoop house, and we should be good to go. Now, if you are watching this video at in a time frame where you really kind of feel like you might have a chance to do a winter harvest, or maybe even fall harvest, or even a spring harvest, the way to know if you have enough time is to look on the back of your seed packet. And the seed packet will give you days to maturity. Although this one is not showing me the days to maturity, I'll have to look that up online and put that on the screen. But parsnips really take about 21 days to even sprout, and then it takes a long season to grow. So I'm not going to be able to harvest these over the winter. What I'm hoping is that they will survive in ground over the winter and then be ready to harvest next spring. So parsnips are going to be one that I'm going to try. This is a total experiment. I tried some earlier this spring and I only have one parsnip still in the ground, and it's like this big around. It's huge. I never harvested it because I wanted to see how it would do if I waited and harvested it until the fall. You know, it may be too big and woody, but we're going to try and see. I've never grown parsnips before, so we're just learning about them and trying to figure out how to grow them. And then we also have several varieties of carrots that we're going to try again. I have the worst luck with carrots. They end up being tiny, they don't grow very big, but I have this dream of harvesting these big, beautiful carrots, so we're just going to keep trying. You know, the tiny ones are still delicious and they are still a harvest, but we're going to try it again. Because I have an open space, it's not going to hurt anything. Now, when I read the back of the seed packet for the parsnips, it says that they need to be planted about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use my little trowel. We're going to dig a trench. And then we're going to just sprinkle the seeds through there. Now, these are huge seeds. Let me show you what the parsnip seeds look like. This is what the parsnip seeds look like. They're really, really huge. So we're going to be able to space these at the distance that is recommended easily. And they recommend planting them 6 inches apart, but I'm going to plant them 3 inches apart, just in case we have poor germination and I can thin them out later. And I think I'll just try one more row. Now, carrot seeds are much more tiny. They're a little more difficult to space correctly, so these you have to watch and thin. Forgot to cover up the parsnips. Got to bury those. So through this area, we're going to scatter some carrot seeds. Try not to do them too thick. Cover those up. Now we're going to do 2 more rows of carrots in the front. And now we've got to do one more thing. Now that these are planted, we've got to make sure that the soil stays moist. So we're going to be using this cardboard weed cloth. It's kind of a thinner, cardboardy, it's much thicker than butcher paper. It's meant to be a weed cloth, but it also breaks down. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that over the top, weight it down with some stones, and see if we can keep the soil moist until they germinate. Now, before we add the weed cloth to cover and shade these and keep them moist, we're just going to water them in really, really well. We've had a ton of rain, so the soil is quite wet already. but I wanted to make sure we had these well watered in. Now we're done with the planting, we're done with the watering. Once or twice a day I'm going to come through here and make sure that this stays moist. Once I start seeing the seeds sprout, I'm going to go get my other little tiny hoop house. It's one that's supposed to be an interior portion, so it's smaller than those other ones. And I will put that over the top of the bed and put some shade cloth over it. Now we've been blessed right now to have a lot of moisture, and it's been cooler. It stayed in the mid 80s, and it's going to stay in the mid 80s for another week. But in about a week or so, it's going to head back up again to the 90s. That's what, at least what the weather app says. And that's part of the reason I'm going to put the shade cloth over it. The other part of the reason is because I want to protect it from the grasshoppers. Last year, the grasshoppers ate the tops off of all of my carrots, and none of them developed. So this year I'm going to try and be proactive, see if we can protect the beds from the grasshoppers, and hopefully we will get a harvest. Now I would love to hear if you winter sow vegetables, and if you do, what kind do you sow and what is your success rate? Do you have to use protection, or are you lucky enough to be in an area where you can just grow winter vegetables all along? When I lived in Southern California, I had 2 growing seasons. I grew my brassicas all winter long. I planted everything in September. No cover was necessary. They did beautifully. And then in the spring and summer, I planted my tomatoes and cucumbers and all of my warm crops. So it was really nice to have that long harvest period. And it's actually really nice to have options so that you can have a longer harvest period in colder climates. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.